take a
Oh, cool.
I just started
We're now live.
So regular media, like people will take a clip, quote mine it, and then they say this is what was said in the clip, and then you watch the clip, it's like that's not what was said. Every side does.
You have to watch the entire like conversation that comes from the clip, right? So like there's so many instances of there just being like a 5-second snippet of something that's without context, and that 5-second snippet gets repeated like ad nauseum. It doesn't even matter like the field. It could be sports, it could be politics, it could be entertainment media, it could be so many different things, but this clip becomes mimetic. But then if you watch it without the context, you have no idea what's actually, being said.
Yeah, I feel like sports prepared me for that. And like there was one recent that I got annoyed at, which is Fauci, which is like Fauci said something like, I represent the science. And if you watch the whole clip, the context of it was that he was claiming people attacked him instead of the science because it was easier to attack him personally than the data because they didn't understand the data. So he said he was being scapegoated for science and not that he represented the institution of science. But then that's what got memed throughout the media circle, which is I represent science. And I was like, these motherfuckers.
No, like, it's easy to be brilliant tactics though. Like in a way, there's an art form to it. Like it's just decentralized. It's just random people on the internet that are taking clips and spreading it all over the place and like taking it through amplifying agents. It's like decentralized propaganda.
Oh yeah, it's bottom up propaganda.
It's just great. It's terrible, but it's great at the same time. Like it's a really fascinating concept because we don't really have like the crowd has never before had such an influence in the creation of the propaganda, Like,
imagine if newspapers just had a Twitter section where everyone just sent in random clips to the newspaper and they had to publish it.
Well, now it's like the crowd can steer the conversation through their actions. So you can even, let's if we take an example like this, so if you're like cutting up the snippet right from the video, right, and you and you spread it like all over the place, right, or someone's doing this, other people do it, or you make a meme, or you do this, or you do that, like it forces legacy institutions or any institution, right, to, comment on it in one way or another. And eventually there's so much more noise coming from the bottom that it subsumes people from the top, and the top begin to like reflect the attitudes of the people who are on the bottom.
And
that's really like I think what's really gone on with let's say like a lot of like the media class and culture, right? Mm-hmm. So I do think at one point a lot of these people were, more independent thinkers and more less reactive to certain like ideologies or claims, or they were more more able to like articulate responses without like falling into these sorts of traps where they need to posture themselves in a certain way to like display their allegiance to the side that they prefer, right? Mm-hmm. Now I think that they've spent so much time with stupid people in the echo chamber that they just reflect the sort of sports fan fanaticism of the stupid people, whether or not it's like, conscious or unconscious. The behavior starts to, come out this way.
I kind of feel that because on Twitter, I should post a lot on Twitter, and like sometimes the stupid people will comment at you, and we all have the same UI. We all get the same like stream of what we see. So it's really, you don't get like an instant, your brain doesn't say this is a stupid person right away sometimes. Like, cause they can be articulate, they can have decent like posturing on their sentences, and then you'll engage.
Big words.
Then you get trapped. You just get trapped with this crazy person for like an hour or two if you decide not to mute. And this happens to so many people. Like you'll see just like these gigantic accounts with 1 million followers just arguing with like somebody with 50 followers. They're like, that take pisses me off. I'm gonna go argue with this random anonymous account with an anime avatar.
I think it's really incredible that there's, this isn't necessarily on Twitter, but this is on like YouTube, for example, right? You have reaction videos to like, like let's say commentator claims or other videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And through
you cut out.
What the original person is saying, or is just completely missing the point and missing the argument.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got, you look at the follower count for this person and it's like 800,000. And you look at the view count for the video and it's like 1 million. And then you go into the comment section and other people are making the same inane like bullshit claims. And it's like, this is clearly what the original text or like what the original video or comment, what was like about. Like it's clearly not what that was about, but they're like piggybacking off of what the person said on that just because it's, kind of like catnip for their side.
Yeah, it's like it's willful misinterpretation, and I waffle back and forth on the is it on purpose and in bad faith, or are they really seeing it that way?
No, I don't think of it as being in bad faith. I mean, maybe in the case of like some people, but I think that most people really do have sort of situational blindness when it comes to, their cause and what they support. It's like, I think it's only human, right? Like you choose a tribe and it's your tribe for you. It's kind of more complex now because we have many different allegiances, but like we get our emotions tied up into the success of what we want. So if the person you hate makes a great point, the vast majority of people are not going to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and when they do, there's a meme for it now, which is the Onion article. The worst person made a great point. I see that all the time.
Heartbreaking.
It's like,
but you have to prepare to have your heart broken like all the time, though.
Yeah, I mean, you see it.
Because you don't have the answers. In the words of Kanye West, you ain't got the answers, Sway.
I'll see Jay make a point. I'm like, I agree with that, but I really hate that guy now. I've seen too many.
Who made a great point?
Sometimes I see James Lindsay. He's gone completely insane, but every now and then he'll say something correct, and I'm like, he's still an asshole, though. It's just
that's just an example of someone who was highly reasonable with like, I don't know, highly reasonable, but let's say very reasonable, right? Who was very like, because even like 3 years ago, I remember him like, you know how you can see what like, what someone is posting, or not what someone is posting, but you'll see what someone is liking on Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he would like all of these like different fucking thirst trap accounts, and it's just like, bro.
I'm glad you noticed that. Other people brought that up to me, where he just flirt with all these random.
I'm just like, I remember I was like reading this. I'm like, do I really want to like what this guy's saying? But if you look at how he was talking like 3 years ago versus how he talks now, I mean, this is obvious, like echo chamber brain poisoning. I reject the people who say that he was always this way. Yeah, because I don't think that people are like immutable. I think people's ideology can change and people can become reactionary. I think it's like you're giving a guy like that, I think that's bad faith to suggest that he was always that way. However, he is, definitely
terrible now.
Gone. But that doesn't mean that his opinions don't hold certain truths in them that aren't worth like respecting. Like I personally subscribe to the belief that if you're going to try to find something that has all of the answers, you're going to fail. And you're just going to subscribe yourself to a worldview that is fundamentally flawed or incorrect. I don't think it's possible to build a like kind of external narrative that is, wholly based on truth, because we all have our own biases and flaws and imperfections. But however, I think if you go through varieties of sources, and I would probably, get in trouble because I would suggest that you do have to go through certain like Trumpy spaces too, in order to get like a broader picture and a broader sense of the truth. But if you're not doing that, you're never going to get as close to 100% as possible. You might get 60 or 70%. And I'd wager if you are only going to, like, let's say Breitbart, you're maybe getting like 20%. But that is still a significant component. Like there are stories across the political spectrum that are reported on only by people that have the intent to damage the other side. And then you got to follow through on these leads in order to like greater understand it. Like if you look, like I think the best example right now, this is the Hunter Biden stuff. Like if you go back a year ago, everything in relation to the story was completely censored on social media as in misinformation. And like the New York Post had their like account suspended for even like reporting on the story, but the story had legs. And it's like the whole thing was done as a form of damage control because they didn't want it to hurt any chance of displacing Trump from power. Now, you can make the argument that this might have been a like necessary thing. I'm not qualified to do that, but like they suppressed information for the greater good, right? Certainly for their greater purposes. But you can't like sit here and tell me that like, the side of the media that's the legacy institutions, that's like the prestige institutions, that they're here and wholly operating in good faith in the interest of truth. Like there's only so many times I could read like safeguard the foundations of democracy without getting like, highly skeptical of these commitments.
The laptop story was weird because like I didn't read too much into it, so I can't say how much I knew about it. But I did know stuff like Carlson saying like crazy stuff, and then saying like he shipped evidence which got lost.
Yeah,
that's nonsense, which hurts their case about the.
Yeah,
and it's just making it still a systemic clusterfuck.
Yeah, so I remember hearing that about that too, and that's another reason why I didn't really look into it at the time. I think I saw certain things, but most of it was only having to do with like, sex stuff. Like I didn't see anything that was like really like damaging as far as like deals are concerned, right? But no, there's stuff on that, like there's stuff that's in that email that implicates Hunter and Joe by extension as like doing deals with foreign entities around the world, and Joe Biden having like a cut of it held for him in the name of another family member, which is highly corrupt, right? Yeah. Like that's influence peddling. But I don't think, like, by no means do I think for that Biden is like the only sort of person that does this stuff in Washington.
Yeah, it seems worse.
But in any case, right? Like this was a story that was essentially suppressed out of existence. I don't know if it was, but here's the thing: like you could make an argument at this that it wasn't suppressed, at least to my knowledge, that it wasn't suppressed by people who knew that it was true. It could just be that it was suppressed by people who were reacting to their own presupposed biases that it was false.
Right.
And I don't think, like, if you go through the chain of command, like we have such a tendency to blame people that are like at the top of these companies for this stuff. And of course they do play a role, right? But this could be some like middle level people that are working in Twitter or working at like Facebook or whatever that just like purged it out of existence. Because like if you look at
Yeah.
like there's ideological competitions that exist within these companies, and there's different tendencies that, you know, like someone like Dorsey was actually very pro open internet.
He's pro internet. He uses crypto. He was fear mongering on inflation recently,
Yeah,
up talking crypto as an answer to inflation. So, yeah, he's a very
he essentially got backed into a corner. But there's a lot of people who are working at Twitter who are not pro, you know, internet free for all.
probably not.
So, and definitely not the new people now that he's gone. So, but of course, you know, Dorsey would take all the blame for it because
Dorsey
you know, you are the public face of a company.
Yeah.
And ultimately the buck stops there. So, yeah, I don't know though. I mean,
one of the Facebook too, and there's the ideological competition there is interesting because people say that it censors more right wing, but like also they purge a bunch of militant BLM pages.
I think Facebook is, yeah, it's funny, like, so for the news sources that serve like liberals, right? There is way more cross-pollination between sort of mainstream conservative outlets and extremist conservative outlets. So like that sort of knowledge that militant BLM pages are being purged, or that like radical socialists like pages are being purged on these sites, just never gets into the public consciousness.
The left like and we don't have a militant side, while the right's fully embrace their militant side.
Oh, it's incredible. Well, it's incredible. It's like these people don't know the actual people that are like on their side. You know, like the right, like for all intents and purposes, like the right have a much better idea, I think, of like who they are and like what they're all about. They have certain like delusions that exist within it, like the idea that, you know, that they are the ones that are protecting democracy, when it's like, okay,
well, everyone
like I don't think, like, at this point, I hate to like both sides it, right? But each side has a different strand of illiberal thinking that is like come to the fore. I would say that the conservative side is more reactive, because conservatives don't like, they really don't create the trends in society, they react to it. It's the whole basis of, you know, of in the ideology. But the conservatives are ones that have the institutional power, while the liberals have the cultural power. So they're both frustrated with each other, and you know, for essentially until this dam breaks one way or the other. So the conservative looks at, you know, liberal influence in organizations, in companies, in culture, in society around them, and how good they are at like proliferating their ideas and spreading their ideas, and making environments that are more like catered to them and they feel threatened and oppressed by it. The liberal, I hate using these terms, by the way, because they're not like necessarily accurate, but the liberal looks at the conservative and just sees all of the institutional power and all of the bulwarks that are in their way of realizing completely the society that they want. And they just interact with each other over and over and over and over and over again until, you know, there's no room for compromise at all, and they just have to destroy one way or the other side. Although I would say that conservatives are a little bit more like, I don't know, because I don't actually spend a lot of time with conservatives besides my family. And that gives me like a very like
the Livermore conservative archetype is my conception.
Well, here's the thing though, is like I don't even hang out with those people beyond my family. Like I have a conception of like what my, you know, very, very socially moderate like family thinks about stuff. But I would wager that the vast majority of these people don't are not under the delusion that they can actually win. They just want to be left alone. It's not like a universalist application. But you know, I've never been to the Midwest. I've never like gone through. I've never even been to church for something that's not for like a funeral. So.
Wow.
What?
I said I went to church for a long while, up until like.
Yeah, so I don't know how these people think. I really don't. I have a biased like. I think sometimes I have too charitable of an interpretation of conservatives, because
Really
you know
hard.
every time I do actually spend like close quarters time with people that are like really hardcore social conservatives, I'm just like, what the fuck? You know, like my brain literally just doesn't comprehend like, you know, some of the things they get hung up on about.
Well, normies are really weird. So my sister, for example, my older sister, Mormon, basically a Republican or conservative. She voted Biden in the last election, but she was worried that he was a communist, and she thought Trump was an ass. And like this was how she's thinking about it. She thought Trump was terrible, didn't like COVID. Her husband's a PA, so she has
Yeah.
her biology was her major. She didn't finish, but she was not bad at it. She just dropped out because she got pregnant. Mormon things to do. And she's like, well, Trump's kind of an ass. Biden's potentially a communist, but I really don't like Trump's personality that much.
I think the real reason Trump lost the election is basically there's enough people that just thought the guy was a moron. Like that's really what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to, is that there is a portion of centrist voters that were just thoroughly embarrassed that this guy was the president.
Then people should have been embarrassed. He was pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, yeah, but there's like people try to read into it more than that, and it's like, you know, I really think that you overcomplicate things by doing so. Like it was not some grand endorsement of like liberal or left-wing ideas. Now, naturally, the way that the debates are framed, you know, a lot of what is proposed by the left wing sounds good to most people, but then you like dig into the question more, and you know, the opinion towards it changes. So, but I think that there's a lot of people that were exactly like your sister, right? That thought that, you know, and this is an extremely like flawed paradigm to work with, right? Because the Democrats are not communists by any means, but
I was like, Biden was the least communist option that we had out of the Democrats.
but like there's a lot of people who think stuff like that that didn't necessarily like left-wing policy or Democrat policies, or at least their, you know, interpretation of it. But the people who were within the club were able to really hijack the conversations. Like, look at all of these endorsements of like our policies. Like, they really want us to. There's a huge movement to decriminalize border crossings. There is a huge movement to defund not only defund but to abolish police in this country. No more police, no more cops, no more laws. We're making, and like, you know, normal people look at that shit and, you know, they're like, well, honestly, normal people don't pay attention to that shit, but eventually when that shit happens, they're like, wait, what the fuck? And now there's this huge portion of people which are not talked about, but I hear it anecdotally all the time. They're like, yeah, Trump was an asshole, and he's stupid, but look at how good society, like, look at how good of an administration he was running. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, how do you do this? Like, how did this happen? You know, like, and that's not even an argument really against, like, the more conventional, like, mainstream democratic policies, because I think those, like, more infrastructure, great. Trying to pursue a universal healthcare system, great. Talking about racial inequity, great. Like, I think all that stuff is great, and I think most people support it. But when you get back to, like, when you get to stuff that, when you go into the specific communities that they claim to support, or that are, like, being, claim to support these communities, and they're telling you something different, then it just doesn't, it just doesn't work. It's like, there's,
I was gonna say, one of the concerns with racial inequity education policy that normies have is that the politicians, or the activists, really both, often treat educational attainment as zero sum, so they take out advanced programs. And sometimes
that's so stupid.
But sometimes it's true that they take out advanced programs because they're like, this is a resource issue.
No, it does. It legitimately does happen.
Yeah, it totally happens. And that's like a legitimate concern about treating educational attainment as zero sum, because that shouldn't be treated as zero sum.
No.
It's not a finite resource. It's an abstract concept.
Also, like, what do like Black parents don't want their kids to be able to be put in advanced placement courses if they show the aptitude to?
Yeah, of course they would want that.
Yeah, I know. It's a ridiculous, like, proposition. So I think this idea that, we need to make it so that the stats are, equal across every racial group, for educational achievement, is just fundamentally unrealistic. It's like, if, and you know what, the funny thing is this comes down to an equity or an equality issue too. It's like, okay, you want all of the flowers to grow to the same height, right? But the flower pots are at different levels in the fucking building. It's like, so what you do is you level off the flower pots. You don't fucking make it so that it's the same at the very top. That's ridiculous. That doesn't do anything for promoting equality in society. But that, of course, is the sort of mainstream democratic solution to it. Is like, you don't deal with the foundations of inequality at the bottom of society. You don't deal with the communities. You just deal with the outcomes.
Yeah, kind of the issue, because I've done a lot of education research, and my master's has a lot of pedagogy and, like, outcome related topics, and, like, a lot of it, I was like, you read it and you're like, this can't be fixed unless we fix, like, the inequality beyond education, the socioeconomic.
Yeah, but that's so hard to do, right? So the idea is that, I think their idea, when it really comes down to it, is a very, like, roundabout way. It's like, if you make it so that you have, you get enough people who may be, relatively unqualified by other means, but you get them to that point, right? That they're able to create wealth for themselves that will help their children in the future and put them into, like, a situation. So it's like, okay, maybe it's unjustified that they get it now, but maybe their kids, they'll have a justifiable version of it. But this creates so many other, like, problems. There's all of these other, like, it doesn't work exactly like this, because when it actually comes to, like, getting hired or being able at getting put down to, like, the point where, you're getting put into you're getting put into the position for, like, wealth creation, right? There's tons of people that are just like, I'm not going to hire you, or they don't hire you. Like, the standards for hiring go up, or they incorporate different metrics to do so. So ultimately, it just devalues the education.
I think there's two ways to go about how education gets devalued, which is, education does get devalued for sure if everyone gets more education. The standards you get higher in companies, they use it as a proxy. So a lot of education can become about mitigating damage from poor decisions in real life, like understanding the damage of taking on debt, like get a new car, right? And the compounding interest instead of like investing into your financial future, or like health related stuff. Having bad health is damaging and it adds to your costs. Having bad teeth is damaging and it adds to your costs. And these are things that you can mitigate. So even if like personal attainments are harder, we could still focus on giving people the option to get more personal attainment plus the bottom up of their lives that can affect happiness, even if they don't get the particular career options they want. And these, so it's like a human capabilities approach to that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't claim to have like the answer for it, but it just seems to me that, so people talk about believing in equality of opportunity and equality of outcome, right? Like, I think there's different ways you can approach it, right? There are a lot of people that believe that equality of outcome is justice, right? But to me, or they say like the idea that equality of opportunity is a sort of misnomer, and it is often invoked, like say by right-wing people, to say that everybody in this country has a fair shot, which is like obvious nonsense, right? There's different situations that people are born into. And by the own, by their own ideology, there's people who have different talents as well. So it's not really equality of opportunity if people are completely different, Now, I do think that there is a role for working hard, right? But
individual advice, it's not policy advice.
What I would prefer is not to pursue an equality of outcome. I would want to make it so that you actually try to realize equality of opportunity to the best point that you can, and make it really so that, make it so that in a vacuum, hard work is the biggest tell of where you're going to go into society.
Make meritocracy more meritocratic instead of like
more and not just invoking that we are a meritocracy already. Like that's not, because that's not the case. I'm not.
Well, take Stanford, for example, right? They got rid of the SATs, I think. It might not be Stanford, so I'm fact checked on that. But
all of the UCs got rid of the SATs.
They got rid of it, but they didn't get rid of legacy admissions. But they got rid of. They got rid of.
You know what? If you ask these people too,
based on they don't have the resources to get the best SAT scores, so they say it favors rich. The legacy admissions favor rich way more.
Do you know what's crazy about that too? Is the suggestion of even ending legacy admissions just gets laughed. It just gets laughed at. They did all these interviews with the ad boards, right? And all they talked about were like, no, well, actually, we want to admit legacy admits because on average they perform better than this was the exact, not the exact, right, but here was the paraphrased version of what the Yale ad board guy said. Is he said that legacy students perform better at Yale, and they perform an important cultural role in introducing non-legacy institutions to the Yale way. And it's like, bro, fuck you. Like, that is so stupid. Like,
it's just like if you talk long enough, you can find any justification.
This school in particular, right, is just incredible in its devotion to both old money, like prestige capitalism.
I wish they were honest about it. They're like,
no, they're not honest about it because they're easily the most woke school in the Ivy League.
If they were honest about it, I wouldn't even be mad. Like, if they were just like, donate a lot of money, so we give them, and like they couldn't even rationalize that. Like, we need money to offer more services to more people.
Like, ultimately, when it comes down to it, I much prefer institutions just be like upfront about their exclusivity, and they're like, yeah, not everyone gets to be a Yale man or a Harvard man And, these people have advantages. You can play the lottery with all the other proles. Like if that happened, yeah, it's shitty, right? But this is a society that I feel way more comfortable, being a part of. I don't like it when people dress up. They're sort of like, I don't like it when people dress up their like institutional sort of, I want to say like, I'll say exclusivity again, but I don't like it when people don't present, or institutions don't present as how they actually are, and they try to wrap it in some like social justice bullshit. Like this is high key annoying to me, and it really is an amazing like sleight of hand to get shit off people's back, because a lot of people just like, they look at it and like, oh, okay, cool. That's why the military does this shit now. There's like the people who actually run shit in this country. It's not for the, the people who are like actually joining the military. It's not for them, right? But for the people who actually, make decisions, like the managerial class in this country, who are the sort of people who have to support wars in order to maintain like the American empire. They care about, how many transgender fighter pilots there are, or how many like, black girl bosses are ordering drone strikes in Yemen. Like it's for that purpose. And there's enough morons that will just see it that way, and they're completely fine with it, right? What's really funny though is that the people who actually support these actions are now like extremely pissed off, and they're like, get them out of our military, we want to be the ones that are dropping the bombs.
Yeah, our military is going to be fine power wise, regardless of
yeah, it's going to be fine power wise. It's the cultural perception of it is just the thing that like will change.
Yeah, the right wingers are calling the military woke now, which is like a complete overreaction. I hear my brother's enlisted, and the way enlisted people talk and how my brother talks, I was like, they're not woke. My brother's probably a little woke.
The propaganda is woke now, though. The advertising campaigns are woke now.
Oh, they're super woke. The CIA one.
But that's not what
the CIA ad where they're like
what?
Intersectionality. Like, so that was said in the CIA ad. I am intersectional. Yeah. And they listed off all their identities. But the CIA is like the CIA. It's still doing all the CIA stuff.
Incredible. It's incredible what these organizations are able to do.
In order to like, the arm of the government that's in charge of murder, just giving woke advertisements. It's kind of how you pacify like revolution and people who want to uproot the system, though, is you give them really cool jobs.
Yeah, I know. That's ultimately what they're trying to do. Is like they're trying to keep the support of the sort of people that would lean towards like essential abolition of the US government. Like that's really what it comes down to, is that there is a non-negligible portion of educated people in the United States who believe that America is a fundamentally evil state.
Yeah, I like America. I just say all governments are evil. That's how I rationalize it.
Well, I mean, that's how I rationalize it too. But from a social stability standpoint, right? Like that is not something that can exist.
We are all equal.
That's not something that can exist in a nation. So I think there's a lot of people, that really like, okay, there's a lot of people that are in power that are cynically employing like these different language terms or beliefs or whatever in order to keep the support of the people who actually drive revolutions. And it's not poor people. It's not your fucking Starbucks barista that's like, got a couple of tattoos and got a couple of piercings and maybe identifies as a cupiosexual or whatever. It's, it's the it's the Buttigieg voting McKinsey consultant who is, actively involved in, capitalists and capitalist excess, but who really, really likes posturing as a radical and a revolutionary. And if you do lose enough of these people, you can really cause a huge upheaval in the government.
Yeah, and the world's unstable. Like the history has shown that stuff is unstable and shit happens.
Yeah, I mean, like, if Trump manages to actually return to power, like, it seems unthinkable, but like, why wouldn't there be a revolution? Why
I think he's the betting favorite right now.
Yeah, I know. He's like what, like plus 200 or something, plus 250. Yeah, I mean, I think of him as the betting favorite. Like, why not? Yeah, and you have to keep in mind that the polls. What?
People just don't like Biden for some reason. I've always been.
He's a non-entity. He's a non-entity as president.
Yeah, I've always
been voted for him to get rid of Trump, but like,
Camilla won't win. Camilla wouldn't beat Trump.
Hey, it's Kamala.
My bad.
No,
this is consistent with
not only won't she win, but like, she's getting actively sabotaged by the mainstream press at this point. Like, there's story after story after story about like how like her office is in turmoil and how she's like a shitty vice president and how she does stuff that like doesn't reach the people. And so they're essentially willing it into existence that she won't win.
About her, they're like, she bought $500 worth of cookware. I'm like, that's pretty reasonable for her status.
I don't like Kamala Harris, but like, I do think that she does get a little bit of a bad rap compared to like, a lot of other people, because like, like what it really comes down to is that she's just a horrible politician. Like, the reason for disliking her is just that she's a horrible politician who's like answers questions like, how come you haven't been to the borders? Well, I haven't been to Europe. Like, she's just not good at this. Like, she's just not good at it. But when it comes down to her as a person, like, I don't like there's nothing really that's that bad about her other than like, okay, apparently she's hell to work for. Who isn't hell to work for in Washington?
That's pretty evil stuff, but what cop isn't evil? It's part of the process.
She was a district attorney in San Francisco. She did like,
they overcorrected on the next.
She did some like all of that stuff. Like, I'm not saying it's like good, but it's like, I think a lot of it is grasping at straws. Like, a lot of it is like, okay, so the only morally righteous candidate, and I do actually agree with this, but the only morally righteous candidate in 2020 was Bernie Sanders, right? And I do believe that, but what necessarily makes Kamala, different than any other politician?
Not much,
other than she's bad at it.
I mean, Biden has.
I don't believe that people hate her because she's black and a woman, though. I think that's stupid. Like, yeah. I think if anything, that raises her value. If she was just like a normal white dude, there's no way she would have made it as far as she did.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but maybe on the right that's the case, but the right doesn't really, dictate.
The right will vote in people of color politicians. They say the right party lines.
Yeah, totally.
They don't even for sexual assault. There's like there's a paper on that about sexual assault, like credible sexual assault allegations are punished way more on the Democrat side than on the Republican side. Like, it's like a non-factor for Republicans.
That makes sense. I mean, like, so when you go back to like Bill Cosby, I remember everyone who was like a conservative, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people were like, what the fuck did Bill do wrong? And people, but like the whole stereotype would be, oh, he's a black man. He's obviously has these like, hypersexual characteristics that lead him to prey on women. Like that's what leftists would ascribe to be like the conservative belief. But the conservatives were like, I don't think that fucking happened.
Yeah, yeah, they overrid it. I talked to a Republican recently who's kind of a rape apologist. So I'm like, yeah, this is what I see from Republicans all the time. I was like, it's weird.
I do think though, to play devil's advocate, right? Like, I think there's only maybe like one very credible like Cuomo story.
Oh yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
any story.
which would get me in trouble, right? But like, if you read through the list of allegations, a lot of them are like, yeah, he touched me on the shoulder and it made me uncomfortable at the party, or he kissed me on the cheek, and it's like, and I really think it's hilarious that Cuomo's defense was just like, I'm Italian, essentially.
Bro,
but really, like, I don't think that Cuomo did anything that he was explicitly told not to do, with the exception of one case, which is really bad, which is like the main one, right? But there's like 8 other people who hopped on, and it's like, him like patting you on the back, and you said it was unwelcome, like 5 years later, like, lady, I think you're grasping at straws.
Your comment on the kiss on cheek thing, my workplace, we localize. We had a sexual harassment seminar, and they brought up all the typical ones that you'd expect. But then they made cultural exceptions. They're like, kissing on the cheek is fine. It's an international workplace. So they're like, this happened. Yeah, they're like, they put stuff like that. They're being culturally sensitive. I was like, that's weird. I was like, what do you mean kissing's fine and that's not sexual harassment?
So like,
I was like, what? They put hugging as worse than kissing on the cheek. I was like, cultures are weird.
So like by that logic, if you are like groped by someone from like a third world Islamist country, right? Like, are you suddenly, is it like culturally acceptable? Is your workplace fine with that?
Probably not. I probably wouldn't have.
I would imagine not. For the record, I would imagine not. But I also don't think that they would ever hire that guy to begin with. So
no,
it comes down to that. But I guess French perv's gonna pass if they kiss you on the cheek.
Yeah, I mean that's what it was for.
But you know what? They do in real life anyway, so it doesn't matter. If you're an attractive French dude, and you're like, and like,
yeah, when you codify rules but you codify the rules for a variety of cultures, it gets really weird because cultures are so arbitrary and they produce a lot of different results.
Yeah, totally.
So it produces a lot of like seemingly contradictory things, but it's not necessarily contradictory because it's all arbitrary.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Kumo's like, yeah, kiss someone on the cheek. So what? That's what all Italians do.
Which is like not true, but still, it's like, but at the same time, though, is it really like all that much of a stretch? Like maybe for someone like our age, right? But is it really all that much of a stretch to believe that showing physical affection from a guy in his 60s showing physical affection towards someone, who he is familiar with and like works with every day and has like a joking relationship with, if like that it is like this moral failing? Because that was like, I guarantee you that stuff, like most of it happened like 10 years ago. That stuff was still considered very much within the realm of, like, if you go back and watch a fucking movie from 10 years ago, even from like 6 or 7 years ago, like the guys are acting in ways and saying things that would get them like considered like misogynists today.
Yeah, then maybe that's not wrong, but also it changed really quick.
It did change really quick, and I think people need to be, very aware of that fact.
Yeah, old people are very different. They have very different views of the world.
They don't, and not everyone is like plugged into the online world and how certain people are like reacting to it. So I doubt someone like Andrew Cuomo, who actually had a fucking life, is, listening in on like,
Twitter.
Woke Tumblr speak from 2015 or whatever.
Somebody's like Twitter is real life. It's just 3 years ahead of real life. All the normies.
Terrifying thought. Maybe.
So you just find out about it 3 years later, if you're not on Twitter.
Do you remember how much more fun Twitter was like 9 years ago?
Yeah, when like the celebrities like basketball players would go on and they just say the most out of pocket stuff.
They're just like, it's like Scarlett Johansson. I would drink your bathwater.
That was her direct.
Hashtag random.
Yeah, I mean Twitter was crazy back then, but you can still get.
No, it was so much more fun. It was like people actually like it wasn't just PR speak.
I love that.
Like everyone who's a blue check is just doing, if they're not like an organically
at this point. Zero. I just follow the low anonic, like the low follower, anonymous or non-anonymous accounts because they're just better. They're just weird. They say the craziest things. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Good for you, man.
But the thing is the blue checks drive discussion on the platform.
I know it's hard to avoid seeing them. So I'm like, whatever. I was like, if they say something important, somebody will quote tweet it, and then I'll see it. But I don't need to follow them for any of their regular takes because they're just saying stuff to cultivate their audience.
Yeah, and audience capture is a real thing, which can drive a lot of blue checks crazy.
Yeah,
which is probably what did James Lindsay in to bring him back.
He really is a good example of audience capture, and some of the people he propped up who were not crazy have also fallen to the similar audience capture, and
you wonder like to what degree is it like legitimate belief and to what degree is it grifting? I think in most cases it's actually legitimate belief because people can make themselves really believe anything if they want to.
I saw a study that said most snake oilsmen believe in their product and that they don't think it's fake. And I
100% believe that. Like that seems 100% true to me.
I don't think James is grifting. And I remember when my friend was concerned about James becoming an insane person because he was like, he saw the new discourse. He's like, it's funded by a Christian nationalist, which makes me worried about his future output because like you get like idea convergence with people you tend to hang out with or they pay you, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, we'll see. And then he became more like that every single day for like the next 2 years. I was like, wow, my friend really had it on the ball on this one. Yeah. I was like, I guess you should care who funds people. You can really see them developing towards that. And it doesn't mean they're grifting, but it can indicate what beliefs they're willing to take in. Like he was willing to take money from a Christian nationalist, so the ideals weren't that unappealing to him.
Yeah. Well, I also think like there are people that made choices, right? In that in order to oppose what James Lindsay cares about the most, he had to side with the audience that is the most vocally resistant to it. It doesn't like there really, I hate to say it, but there really isn't a lane for people who are concerned about the excesses of like woke culture, if you want to call it that. I don't really like calling it that, but if you want to call it that, but there isn't really a lane for these people who are like that, but are also like non-conservatives. I mean, there is certainly an audience of people who might feel this way, but the things that the entities that have captured this audience and the issues that have captured this audience are so much more powerful than just like one guy.
Well, because they're fanatics.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't know. It's either going to go one way or the other, right? But there's not going to be a left candidate that emerges. Well, okay. I'd say there are certain conditions that need to be met for a left candidate to emerge that opposes wokeness, quote unquote wokeness, which I don't like saying because that means so many different fucking things.
Without being a right winger secretly. on the
Yeah,
political field because they might fail that purity test, so they have to walk a line.
they have, for one, they have to be a person of color, probably black. And two, they probably have to be of a working class background. Um, and they have to arise in a way that they have credibility for what they're saying, and they can't be just tarred down. So I don't know, until something like that happens, like you skeptical because most people who actually are like self-identified like socialists or communists or whatever um are extraordinarily like pro, you know, this like are very entrenched in this culture. Um, and I don't think it's something that is like I also like I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it's not something that wins support for your ideas. And you have to, if you want to win on the things that actually change the conditions that create the problems you talk about, then it's just self-defeating. And there's a portion of me that believes that there are a lot of people who would rather lose but be purists than win and just change the way they speak about things.
The Latinx and Latina thing is a good example of willing to sacrifice electoral votes for a word ideology.
Yeah, this topic has been done to death at this point.
Right.
But like
it's a good flashpoint of willing to sacrifice electoral votes for a purity test.
Which makes absolutely no sense if you actually do believe that that the foundations of American democracy are under an existential immediate threat.
Right?
It doesn't make any sense.
So you want the normies who you think have wrong thought. You need to pretend they don't have wrong thought to you if that's your belief. Because if you care about material outcomes, you have to compromise in politics.
Yeah, and this is something that actual like left-wing radicals understood in the past. It's just that like people in the present day are so caught up in achieving individual self-gratification that you really can't. Yeah, I totally relatable, but you you really can't past a certain point. I lost my train of thought, but you really can't past a certain point care about that. Like you need to do whatever it takes to win in the situation. And when it comes down to it, the things that are the most popular, like I think if we're talking about like racial disparities, I don't think there's a problem with talking about past like American incidences of racism, of which there are many. But normies don't want to hear about on like endless negativity. They don't want to hear about like the foundational evil of the country, because most people grow up with like a sort of positive interpretation of the place that they're from and the country that they're with. And they're much more positive people. Being an irony dripped radical that only appeals to a certain percentage of the population, right? And these people, they may work with other like-minded people that share these same cultural values and orientations towards society, but past a certain point, you can't really scale from helping a particular community in a very likely like urban area. You can't create the coalition that's needed to actually address the systemic problems that you claim to care about. Because you're going to come across people who have very different outlooks and very different interpretations of the world around them, and who don't necessarily like, the way you look at things, and but might like a lot of your proposals. So it's like you either gotta work together, or you're gonna just fail.
The book Rules for Radicals is a great book, which is basically like, it's like you have
I
to.
read that when I was like in high school. But
it's like you have to win the normies. You have to win those people over, because how else are you going to get stuff done if you alienate everyone?
Yeah, it's there. But when it comes down to it, a lot of these people, though, they do want to be seen as counter to the culture. They want to be seen as countercultural. They want to be seen as different. They want to be seen as special. They want to be seen as the opposition. They want to screech in the corner about how many problems exist in society and talk about changing it, but never actually compromising on the things that they can do to make society better. And the people that do have sorts of long, grand term strategies and visions quickly get shut down as being collaborators or something or another, because they don't adhere to the same, outlook that the rest of the group does. And fundamentally, that's just I don't know, it's just excessive masturbation, intellectual masturbation, social masturbation.
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely is.
And I don't know, I don't really have sympathy for these people, because you're not really doing the things that are needed. And it's a very anti-political take as well, because politics, by the rules, necessitates gamesmanship. You don't just win everything all the way. Like,
yeah, you never win.
Even revolutions have to compromise. Even authoritarian revolutions have to compromise because of their members' composition.
Yeah,
because everyone has different thoughts and ideas.
And then there's always a battle.
Yeah, but that's not. But that's not to say that like the people that you're going to win over, right, are also going to operate in like complete, good faith, right? But yeah, it's just damn, it's annoying. It's really annoying, because I would like to see a society that is fundamentally like happier and more peaceful and more like equal amongst the people that are in it, where people are, living in relative, I say relative because complete is impossible, but like relative,
it's always relative,
racial harmony or social harmony, where you can't really wipe out, all of the inequities that exist within society socially, but that it's much, 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 much better. And I believe that it is, achievable, and for that society to have a positive opinion of itself. But there's a lot of people who just want to have the negative opinion of it, for all
eternity.
Yeah, for all eternity.
No matter what we do after. And that's not how you're going to win normies over, because normies are like, well, if it's bad, let's just fix it and then consider it good. And they're like, no, foundationally evil. Like, people get hung up on the past. So, yeah.
And they're like, cool, let's fix the foundation of it then. And they're like, okay, we fixed the foundation. Oh, it's still the same foundation, so it's evil, right? But it's like, you can't have this interpretation of like governments or institutions, because, the solutions available to you become less and less valid over time. So it's like, what happens when inevitably, right? Like, okay, let's say you have a revolution and you change the foundation of the country, right? And you set up a new government, you set up a new system, right? Well, people are flawed actors, so they're inevitably going to make mistakes that are bad, that
Yeah.
are just bad. So, what happens in 50 years? What happens in 100 years when you take that century's version of morality and retroactively apply it to the past? You can say, oh, well, this foundation's wrong too. So like, let's have another one. It's like, that's just not a good way to run society.
It's very Sisyphusian. The boulder always falling back down.
Yeah,
We're
no, it's
almost
like,
there. We're almost getting there.
I mean, I totally think that there's things in American society that, probably necessitate radical change. And I think that
Our cops are fucked up. We do need
I
reformation.
do think our cops are fucked up, but I don't think just taking
Politicians-
cops out of neighborhoods, fixes the problem.
I was like, that just creates a vacuum of power. Right?
And then the
You
people
get
are like,
worse-
oh fuck, I want the cops back and more of them.
And then we'll probably overcorrect and get worse cops than before. You're right.
Yeah, because you've already made it socially unacceptable to become a cop.
Yeah, my
So,
friend,
like,
one of the greatest people I know is like, I don't want to be a cop anymore. They'll probably corrupt me. That's his belief, right? He's kind of my best friend.
probably not a wrong belief though.
And he's like, I don't want to be a cop anymore. I think they could corrupt me because I'm an impressionable person. I was like, fair enough. And I know someone who resigned, who finished the academy. He went in for a week. He's like, these guys are assholes. I don't want to be here anymore. And he quit and became a personal trainer.
I want to be a personal trainer.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. But yeah, I mean, we definitely have an incentive now where shittier people are becoming cops. We need cops. Like I was like, if I became a cop, that would be a moral good for society because I'm awesome. I wouldn't be corrupt. I don't want to punish people with power. I want to
probably get fired for it. Let's be
real.
Real.
I would probably get fired as a cop.
Yeah.
We're running at like an hour now, so I think we should wrap up soon. So if you have any final words.
Nah. I don't have any final words.
I'm expecting.
Do you want to keep talking or not?
Maybe we can keep talking if you want. I'm expecting us to get like 3 views on this, and then maybe in 30 years, maybe 5 or 10. I don't know who's gonna watch. There's stats where that can see when people stop watching on YouTube too.
Really?
So we can see when exactly we lose people. We can really analyze like what people were interested in and when they lost interest.
Interesting. I will be skeptical if it's anything like more than 20 seconds.
I bet we can get people in for 5.
What I say is not that insightful.
No, we didn't say anything new or cool or interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah. I feel like we could probably have a much more cool discussion about something.
Well, this will be for us in 30 years. Just look back on it. Like, remember the times? Crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, if we do domain-specific stuff and get much deeper into it, maybe we can say insightful things. But otherwise, we're just vibing.
I agree. I'm fine with just vibing, though.
There's an audience
I'm fine with doing
who want there's an audience for people who want obvious things said to them.
It's very true. It's very true. There's also just like an audience for people that just want semi-intelligent friends and commentary in the background.
I'll respond to people who give semi-intelligible comments on YouTube.
That are also just like kind of funny.
Yeah. I mean, all of your YouTube comment I've gotten so far on my other videos have been deranged. It's like I've gotten
dude, if you're part of any like internet podcast fan base, you're automatically a deranged person.
On my nihilist video, someone's like, "Oh, I get it. So you're privileged." I'm like, "It's a weird." That's a weird thing to say to someone who's made a nihilist video. I guess
that's funny.
I'm like, what? I was like, what for though? I didn't respond to him. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna give this guy any time of day. I'm like, there's nothing I can.
Oh, you don't care about. Like, cool. I care about your comment.
And then I'm like, I know Shimon has all the comments and she like responds to people. I'm like, damn, she doesn't care about her mental health at all. These people are insane. Like, I get a small dose of insanity on Twitter all the time. But she has a whole audience of people who are just crazy.
I think it's amazing that there's like single-minded people on the internet that are dedicated to one particular like niche cause, and they just shitpost all day about it or complain about it all day.
It was
It's
Nationals Day, and that's what they were doing all day. I looked through their Twitter feed for like 12 hours.
who?
Ethno nationalists.
Like ethnic nationalists?
Yeah, ethno
Oh,
state.
okay. I was saying like, okay.
That's all they posted about all day. I looked through their Twitter feed. They had like 12 hours of just going to bat for ethno nationalism.
Like a particular ethnicity or just
Yeah,
ethno nationalism in
pure
general?
states, sovereign places for each race, stuff like that.
That shit still exists on Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Damn, I'm not really on Twitter. That's amusing.
That
Kind
was
of
their whole Twitter feed.
ridiculous.
I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna keep engaging with this person. I muted them and I did some drive-by comments and they spammed my Twitter feed, but I had them on mute. I go check, like, see like 12 comments at me. I was like, I'll do another drive-by. I'll leave a comment again. I'll keep them distracted over here. But yeah, they exist. All right, we're gonna sign off on this video. This is Josh. See ya.
This is Nick. Bye.